Today we're going to be learning 6 different ways of achieving levitation in photography and videography. Plus, I'm going to teach you how this photo was made. And no, I did not fall or use Photoshop. So if you're tired of bad levitation tutorials out there and you want to learn something new, well then this video is right for you. Roll it! Welcome back to the show. Mystery Man the Mystery Man here to talk about levitation photography. Before I was a photographer, I was a magician. So I have a really unique perspective on how this should be done.
What is levitation?
Levitation.
An illusion that appears to unnaturally defy gravity, or being suspended in air without any mechanical supports.
Levitation photography is a bit cringy.
If you don't believe me, search levitation photography on Google or Instagram. Part of the reason is so many sources are just teaching it wrong.
So without wasting any more of your time, let's get started.
Method 1. Support and mask.
You probably clicked on this video from another that taught you this very same technique. In fact, 95% of YouTube videos on levitations teach only this method and somehow manage to drag it on for 10 minutes, when it could literally be explained in just 10 seconds. All you do is take 2 pictures, one with just the background and one with the levitatee on a platform. Then, using Photoshop, just remove said platform and voila, levitation.
This method is essentially a very basic form of compositing.
Compositing.
Combining multiple visual elements to create the illusion that it's the same image.
In this case, we're only using 2 images and they happen to be pretty identical. Normally, compositing is a lot more complicated than that, and we'll get to that in a second. But first, let's rewind to the history of levitation tutorials on YouTube.
Very first video that I saw on this topic, go check out Photo Extremist. The video is 10 years old by now. He still has a whole bunch of videos on his channel, very informative and very creative, and a lot less fluff. So over the past 10 years, there's been dozens and dozens of tutorials teaching the exact same thing he did. But for some reason or another, the quality has just gone down. We went from Levitations to the invisible box challenge. So how do we fix it? Well, first we gotta address the problem. Here is the problem. When we rest on a platform, whether it be standing, sitting, or laying down, our body weight is distributed in a certain way. Even though levitation isn't real, we know how it should look.
So if we're going to be trying this method out, here's one tip.
Photo tip.
If you are comfortable as the model, you're doing it wrong. It's going to look wrong. The telltale sign is this right here. A very obvious horizontal line that's due to the surface the subject was laying on. How do we get rid of this? Simple. If you're comfortable, you're doing it wrong. So, instead of laying down on one table, how about balancing in between 2? You'll need some serious core strength not to crumble, but at least your clothes will hang freely as they should. Let's use my example. This right here is my most famous photo, both a blessing and a curse. I did a separate video that went into the behind the scenes in more detail, so I'll just skim it today. Someone was carrying her, allowing her bum to fall down naturally. Then, the person was removed in Photoshop. Simple as that. You can see how she's floating higher now, and that's the beauty about this method. Make it look more impossible. My favorite photo of all time that used this method has to be one by Miss Aniela. Once you see this photo, you realize how bad all the other ones are. We have the potential to make some magic here, but instead, we always get the sitting on a invisible aquarium look. We can do better. Come on, guys. This is how Miss Aniela put it together. She was kind enough to provide some behind the scenes. You can see she's using the masking method, but instead of just lazily sitting on something and erasing it, she's doing a composite to make it look truly magical.
Photo tip.
If you want to check out a modern wizard with this method, check out Rob Woodcock's. He did a great tutorial with Flern, showing us how to combine multiple images into one. But instead of using a chair and then masking it out, he had his model jump off a platform, which got rid of that awful line, and it made the illusion a bit more believable because he wasn't resting on anything. Which is what almost every tutorial on this subject gets wrong. The distribution of the body ruins the illusion. Rob makes it look right by working a lot with dancers, who gracefully jump into various poses. Speaking of jumping, let's jump into method 2.
Jump.
This sounds pretty simple, but it's a bit trickier to actually get it right. The good thing about this method is you don't have to Photoshop anything out. It looks great straight out of camera. There are a few options here. The first is to be stiff and rigid while you're leaping, and the other is to contort unnaturally. I remember coming across a Japanese artist who did a phenomenal job a few years ago with a series dedicated to floating in an urban setting. Now, I know it sounded cheesy when I said just jump, but looking at these results, you can't help but be inspired. Personally, I like to have something epic in the background, and I love not including the floor. This makes it seem like you were a lot higher than you actually were. If you don't have the greatest vertical jump, jump off of something. If you jump off of a platform, and then you are able to not include that platform in the photo, it makes your jump look extra impressive. I used to do this all the time, and people assumed I just photoshopped myself. Seriously, don't hurt yourself.
Speaking of hurting yourself,
There was another artist actually who that was his whole deal, is he would jump off of things and hurt himself. But he was a professional stuntman, so don't try this at home. But his photos got really popular. One of them is actually in Ricky Martin's bedroom. So a little extra tip, because this is a photography channel after all, as far as shutter speed goes, it's up to you. If you slow it down enough, we can get some motion blur to make you look like a ghost, making it look like you're flying or about to fly. But with the higher shutter speed, we can really freeze that motion and capture you in midair. So there you go. Super obvious, I know. Let's move on to number 2.
this next method is essentially a more efficient form of the last method, and it's used by a lot of videographers and Hollywood.
Method 3. Green screen.
This is how the big boys do it. This method is arguably the best of all because you can even do video if you wanted to. The invisible support method is only easy when the two photos line up perfectly. When they don't, there's a lot of editing to be done. By using a green screen, we simplify all of this to just one click. In order for this to look convincing, you have to preserve all these settings: lighting, depth of field, angle, perspective, resolution, and scale. So, in theory, you can shoot the subject, then move the camera elsewhere to set up your perfect composition, then place the levitatee wherever you want. You're not limited to how high you can jump or if it's too dangerous. You can fake the danger factor just by using your imagination.
Method 4. Wowzers.
If you thought the last method was hard, well then this is definitely unachievable to 99% of you out there. Chances are you were inspired by levitation in the first place because you saw it on the big screen. I don't know what movie it was, but that's how it got into your mind. Before green screens were a thing, movie makers had to use practical effects to pull this off. This is still used today in many action films. Although they aren't really levitating, they can do some superhuman things, and the removal of the wire makes it almost a convincing effect. I warned you, this one was out of reach. You can combine the wires method and the green screen method, and that's pretty much how a lot of movies are made these days. The wires take care of the floating part, and the green screen, it makes it a lot dangerous. Since this is not achievable for most of us, and a bit of an overkill for just photography, let's move on. Another way movies pull this off is to get into a plane that simulates the weightlessness of 0G. You might have felt a similar feeling to this on a roller coaster, going up real fast and then going down. That moment in between, your bum lifted off from the seat for just a second. It's kind of like that, but for 20 seconds at a time. And it's not as expensive as you might think. It costs about $4,000 to experience space and weightlessness. But let's get back to practical effects. So now it's finally time for my personal baby.
Method 6.
I am very proud of this one in particular because I stumbled upon it by accident, and it has been my little secret all these years. In my early years, I was relying very heavily on special effects photography. I was obsessed. So one day, me and my friend Kate tried to take pictures in a very unique area. And this is what we came up with. It was right out of the Matrix. It wasn't quite a levitation, but in a way, it turned out to be better than if it actually was. If a magician levitates, you know something is off. But if he can bend like this, suddenly it becomes believable. A very popular Japanese magician named Cyril made this particular levitation popular in the early days of YouTube. So that was the inspiration. The Cyril Matrix Float. In the comments right now, I want you to guess how this was done. Don't comment at the end. Do it now. Here are the stipulations though. Number 1, no Photoshop was used to remove anything or add anything. No wires, no invisible supports, none of that. And number 2, I never felt. It wasn't really the jump method. So I didn't use 1, 2, 3, or 4. None of the previous methods. This isn't the jump. I just stood up right after. And no Photoshop, so that takes care of the other methods. So, how was this done?
So here is your clue.
Pyramid head.
That's right, it's just a hill.
Perspective.
By tilting the camera, we can fuse and take advantage of the perspective. And the best part is, the body won't be as unnatural because it's not resting on anything except for the feet. The trickiest part about this method is to actually find a hill that's steep enough. After that, it's just about balancing. It's not levitation exactly, but it still appears to defy gravity. Perspective is used as an illusion in many creative ways. You might have seen the tilted house illusion, which is similar to my tilt the camera to make the steep thing look like the horizon effect. But you can also use perspective to shoot from above or below. It could make for some hilarious results or be convincing enough to make it look like zero gravity. In fact, the hallway scene from Inception was filmed this way. This one is really neat because you don't need to do anything fancy. Just put some water on the ground and then find the perfect angle. Make sure the shape of the shadow is congruent with the shape of the subject. So let's recap.
Support and green screen. Perspective.
I hope you learned a lot about the many different ways of doing levitation in photography and videography. If you're interested, we're going to try each method, well, not the space or crazy method, each like achievable method in future episodes. So if you're interested in seeing that, subscribe. So if there's one thing you should have learned from this video is to get rid of that telltale sign. When you're sitting somewhere, your body is laying in a certain way. And we have to get rid of that because you look comfortable. And if you remember,
If you're comfortable, you're doing it wrong.
This is the end of the show. Watch more videos. You don't have to go. I hope it was